We saw that in the book of Psalms, it deals with the question of how we go to God. And we saw that this is what the book of Psalms talks about. And the structure of the book of Psalms is that it's divided into 5 parts. And the first 2 mainly deal with David, uh, and most of them are written by David. 73 to 89, a lot of them talk about exile, how the Israelites were taken from Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians. And books 4 and 5 are a response to that. So we saw how David expresses various emotions to God, be it fear, how he cries out when enemies are after him, and pain when he's overwhelmed by his troubles, he goes to God. And when he's feeling guilty, when he does something wrong and he feels bad about it, how he goes to God for that. And he talks about the experience of confessing and forgiveness. And also when God seemed far away and didn't seem to be doing anything, we saw that even then David goes to God and asks and pleads before God. And whether it's asking justice before God when they're seeing evil around the world and it looks like people who are doing bad and oppressing others seem to be the one winning, even then David takes that to God and appeals to God's character to intervene in that situation. And there are several praise psalms in the Bible. Here David praises God's creation, and says how majestic God's name is in all the earth. And book 3 talks about the exile, how the temple was destroyed, how Israel was destroyed, Jerusalem was destroyed, and they were taken captive by the Babylonians. Talks about that experience and asks God why God has rejected them. The Israelites appeal to God, and book 3 ends with the question asking where that great love that that great promise that God made to David, where is that love and where is that faithfulness? And we see books 4 and 5 are like a response to that, and more the Psalms become more and more positive. And the key here in several of the Psalms is to remember the story and to see how God has been redeeming Israel for throughout its history, and that God would continue to do that, even though at this time it may not feel that way. Many Psalms appeal to God's character, His sovereignty, and ask them to remember their story, and appeals and says that if you're wise, you will see in the history of Israel the faithful love of the Lord. And all their hopes for family and community and everything that they're hoping for, the psalmists always tell and appeal the people to put their hopes on God, because His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom and God always keeps His promises. That's His nature, that's His character. And Psalm 145 ends like that. 146 to 150, they are all praise psalms, and the book of Psalms ends with let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Moving on to the book of Proverbs, it is a book which helps us to be disciplined and live a successful life. And chapters 1 to 9 talk about that, the idea of wisdom and the fear of the Lord, and the importance of wisdom and the preciousness of being a wise person and how important that is in our lives. It talks about that. 10 to 31 are the actual proverbs of the couplets. And just as how the difference between a good world and a fallen world was that attitude that I know better, similarly, the difference between our whether we have a good life, whether we live a wise life, making the right decisions, or whether we destroy our lives by making foolish decisions, that also depends on that very same attitude. And that's why the book of Proverbs often talks about how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. and in several areas of our life, be it money, work, how we speak, and relationships, and making better decisions. Just in every aspect of life, we see the book of Proverbs dealing and looking at every issue from different angles, and helps us when God gives us wisdom. He will help us to make the right decisions for our situation. So whether we are at school and we're studying, or when we're with our families, when we're on our phones, when we're playing outside, whatever we're doing, those everyday daily activities that we're doing, the book of Proverbs helps us to consider every area of our life and make wise decisions in each area of our lives. And that is what the book of Proverbs is all about.